Good afternoon. This is Jessica from Next Gen Personal Finance. I am not sure why it does not like it when I'm in full screen mode. There we go. Sorry about that. You should now be seeing my first slide. You should be hearing my voice. We're about to get started here. If you're new to the GoToWebinar platform, you have a little spot where you can write in questions to me. And as I see those come in, I will sometimes answer them immediately, and other times I will kind of get to them in a minute or two. But feel free to contact me that way anytime you want to throughout the course of this webinar. Thanks for joining me. The other thing we're going to do is take a few polls, and I'm going to go ahead and launch one of these right now because I want to get a sense of who is on my webinar here. By asking how often you've used any NGPF resources in your classroom this year. So not necessarily semester course, but any NGPF stuff so that I know whether you're brand new to NGPF or are a frequent NGPF user, but maybe looking to dig more into the semester course. So once you have a chance here, please go ahead and vote on your screen. All right, only 10% of you are. Oh, look at that typo. Sorry, brand new to NGPF. And most of you have used us in some fashion already this school year, sometimes multiple times a week. Great to hear. I'm glad you're finding the stuff you need to use in your class. So in today's webinar, we're going to do some very brief introductions. I'm going to go over the overarching philosophies for the semester course. We're going to deep dive a bit into the course map and some of its features, and then I will offer you some support and follow-up to go along with semester course. So the next thing I would love to do is ask one more poll here about how familiar you are with the semester course specifically. So not Next Gen materials in general, but the semester course, which is the topic of this webinar. So go ahead, if you can, get in a vote for me to tell me how familiar you are with the semester course so far. Last chance to get in a vote here. Okay, for the 18% of you who have already used semester course in the classroom, you may find this a little bit redundant, but you may pick up some good pointers. And good to see that most of you are very brand new because we're going to go over some of the fundamentals. Great to know. All right, so very brief introductions. I'm Jessica from Next Gen Personal Finance. In terms of the semester course itself, I wrote probably about half of the lessons. There are 90 of them, and I wrote probably about half of them. I've been at Next Gen sort of the longest of any employee other than Tim, the founder himself. So a lot of the projects, activities, resources that you see, I've had my hands on or have developed myself. So you've probably, if you've used our resources before, used a Jessica resource. Prior to coming to Next Gen 4 years ago, I was the principal of a high school in Brooklyn, New York. So I am very, very familiar with the high school population. And way back in the day, I was a math teacher as well. So I've never actually taught personal finance full-time, but I've been in the math classroom. I see somebody's got a question for me. Okay, no problem. Okay, great. So the last thing I kind of want to get a sense of from you, and this is the last poll we'll take here until much later, is sort of what's your vision for how you're going to use the semester course next year? And be honest of where you are on this spectrum. Great. Looks like we've got a pretty even split on this one. Totally understand if you're on the fence right now, especially if you're relatively new to Next Gen Personal Finance, or if you really haven't had a chance to look at the semester course. I certainly wouldn't sign up to teach it if I didn't know anything about it either, so I can't say I blame you. All right, let's look at the course sequence. This is where we're going to start because, it's important to know where we're coming from. So I mapped out the semester course and played around a lot with how do we sequence these 10 units that we're going to include. And ultimately what we decided to do, and some people think this is awesome and some people wish we had done it differently, is we kind of did it chronologically in life stages for your students. So we talked about where they are now, and it's a little weird because they call it career, but this first unit is basically focused on the fundamentals of finding a job and kind of very much geared at you're a high school student, maybe you want a part-time job or an internship or something like that. This is not a career exploration type of unit, nor do they do anything about like which bachelor's degree do I need to get my career? Do I need advanced training? What's my starting salary? It's not focused on that aspect of finding a job. It's instead focused on like resume, cover letter, filling out an application, doing a LinkedIn profile, and applying for a job, doing interviews, that kind of thing. So it's very focused on them as a teenager looking for a job, not focused on them as a adult looking for a job. So some people like that, some people don't. But then basically we kind of went chronologically from there. Okay, you're a teenager, you get your first job, you're working at fast food. The next thing you should probably understand is taxes, because you're going to get your paycheck and you need to learn how to read a pay stub and make sure you're getting taxed fairly. So taxes is next. Then you kind of think, okay, now you've got this paycheck from your first job and you need to understand checking accounts so that you can set up a bank account to cash your checks and to start saving money. So we go into saving. And then we kind of think, okay, a little bit later, maybe in their high school career, they're going to be thinking about paying for college. And that's where we inserted paying for college. And then we kind of think like, okay, once you become a young adult, then you're going to think about the types of credit. You're potentially taking student loans. That's a type of credit. You're potentially going to open a credit card. And of course, you need to learn how to manage all of those types of credit that you might bring into your lives. And then we kind of get into the more adult topics that don't really touch most teenagers, like investing, insurance there. And then again, some people like this, some people don't. We leave budgeting for the very end because we kind of did budgeting from the perspective of once you understand all of these other things and you've got some student loans you're going to pay back and you have started, you know, a 401k or a Roth IRA or something, so you've got some investments and you need to pay your own insurance, etc. Then we sort of do budgeting from the perspective of a working adult and all of the things they would be responsible for. So there's not just one right way and one order in which to teach personal finance. So it's open to rearranging this, and we'll talk about that a little bit longer. If you're like, this is not the way I would have done it myself, you can certainly rearrange, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the overarching philosophies of the course, now you know kind of the scope and sequence and how we decided to sequence it that way. And here's kind of overall what you can expect from our semester course. First of all, we are not a textbook company, nor are we a provider of PowerPoint lectures. And a couple people have asked like, oh, it'd be great if all of these had PowerPoints to go along with them. But that's just not really our style. We kind of instead have structured the lessons so that there are videos, articles, infographics to sort of teach the content. That's how we've structured the lessons. And there's flexibility there, which I'll also talk about. But no, we do not have PowerPoint lectures to go along with everything. We really feel like students learn their very best by doing things. So we have included lots of really big, full activities, projects, etc. And we have some recommended strategies, which I'll show you later, for shortening those up if you need to. Things like goal setting, that's another question we get. A lot of state standards have something about like decision making, like how do you comparison shop or things like that. And we've actually embedded these core skills throughout the entire curriculum. So you don't find a lesson that's like, hey, here's how you set a goal. It's more like throughout lots of our activities, we talk about goals and, you know, how do you set them? How do you make them attainable, etc. And then each of our units also has some extra resources that we've thrown in that are things that didn't make the cut into the semester course, but that we think are really, really good. I will remind you again, if you have questions throughout, you're welcome to type into the question box and I'll get back to you. Sometimes people get too friendly and just type me things like, hey, Jessica, how's it going? And then I stop and I read those and disrupt the flow. So I love to chat with all of you, and I'll do that at the end if you want to. But if you have a question you'd like me to answer, hit me with the question and I'll try to do it mid-webinar. So the first thing I would tell you is, as you embark on this, you need to kind of do a deep think about the overarching course map. And some things I'd have you consider are some of these units addressed in another class? For example, some schools have really active college counselors, so that whole unit on paying for college doesn't need to get done because kids are immersed in that somewhere else. Same thing, sometimes, like if you have advisories or senior seminars or something like that, you could certainly feel free to cut out any content that they get elsewhere. You should also, of course, look to see how our course aligns to state standards. We've aligned to the Jumpstart National Educator Standards for personal finance, but you should definitely cross-reference. And sometimes people will do that cross-referencing and they'll find a couple things that are not in their state standards, or that are in their state standards that we haven't included in semester course. And feel free to email me and I can kind of point you in the direction of some resources sometimes that we didn't include, but that we have elsewhere in our curriculum. Think too about what units your population needs most. We get some people that are like, I spend very little time on checking accounts because all of my students already have checking accounts and I just don't feel like it's a good use of time. We've got other folks who say like, the kids really need a lot of support in like the paying for college stage. Like I'm expected to get them through their applications and their essays and stuff like that. And if that's the expectation, you're certainly going to need to cut something else out to have time to do all of that. And again, feel free to rearrange the units if you see a better way to present the material to your students. The one thing I will caution is we do have a pretest at the beginning, a sort of a diagnostic, a midterm, and a final. And if you rearrange the units, the midterm may not work out for you as well, because if you skipped some of the stuff we thought you would have hit by the midterm, then the midterm is not going to align anymore. So you're going to have to do some finagling of the questions. But otherwise, think about whether you want to rearrange, and do or don't. We really don't care either way. We're not too particular about how you use our resources, as long as you do a really good job teaching the kids personal finance. So I told you about the 10-unit sequence, and I want to show you the course map because this is something else for you to kind of really understand. And this is the fundamental document you would use to run your class, basically. Okay, so here is the semester course map. And what you're going to see here is all 10 units are here. And then as you scroll down, diagnostic exam, and then that's period 1. And remember I said, or I think I mentioned that there's 90 total periods in this. So that's number 1. Number 2, here's the lesson. And when you click on it, you'll get the Google Drive document that shows you the lesson. And then you just kind of move through. You will see here that this all says teacher access only. So if you're looking at our NGPF website and you click on the semester course map, you will get this one that has some of these that say teacher access only. In order to get the semester course map that has the links to the unit tests and the summative assignments, you need to create a free teacher account on our website. So if you have not done that yet, I would recommend doing that. I'll show you where real quick. You go to ngpf.org, and then up here you can create a free account. Basically, you'll create a free account. It's best if you sign up with your educator email address. Danielle or Dinesh from our team will go ahead and verify that the email account you signed up with does indeed belong to a teacher in like a staff directory. And then they'll switch you from a general account to a teacher account. And once you have that, when you are on our website, you will get access to all of our online assessments. You will also receive a semester course map that is labeled teacher version only so that you can see those assessments right from there. And you will get answer keys to everything you need to support yourself on the semester course. So if you have not created a teacher account already, I would definitely recommend doing so. Okay. So looking at this course map, basically, one other thing I want to point out, everything in this Google column is going to open up a Google document. In Guru is an online free platform. It's kind of like a learning management system. We've loaded all of our semester course resources onto Guru. If you're already using Guru, you probably know how it works. If you're not using Guru, I honestly would not necessarily recommend that you go that direction. If you're thinking about it, give me an email, because it's not used very much by our teachers, and we are questioning how much to continue supporting it. So if you're a big Guru proponent, let me know. Or if you're really considering using it, get in touch with me first, because it's not my number one recommendation. That's all I'll say about it for right now. Okay, so the next thing I sort of want to show you, and again, this sort of gives you all 90 lessons, all laid out by unit. Here's which number it is in the 90 lesson sequence. Here's the topic, and here's the Google Doc. I see somebody's got a question. Okay, great question. Do the periods equal a class day, or how many days you need to spend on the topic? Great question that I'm going to talk about very soon. So I'll come back to that, I think. But that's a really good question that I will answer very shortly. Okay. Looking back here, the other thing you want to maybe look at is the unit plan. The unit plan drills down for just one unit, and here's everything in the savings unit. So savings is unit 4. There are 4 lessons in savings. There's a unit assessment in savings, and there's also the extra resources. This is where you find the extra resources that will support that particular unit. So this is kind of where we get into the answer to your question. All right, the way it's structured is there are 90 45-minute periods, and therefore 90 total lessons. Some of those lessons are days to give the assessment. Some of those lessons are sort of for midterms or diagnostic or something like that. But in general, there are 90 45-minute periods. Each general lesson starts with some sort of opening, which is either a discussion prompt, a data crunch, or a tiny little mini activity in some cases, and a slide that tells you the essential questions that will be answered during that lesson. Then every lesson has so that takes roughly 5 minutes. And then every lesson has 35 minutes of various resource types. And then there's another 5 minutes to do an exit ticket. And that's how it is structured. If your class periods are slightly longer than 45 minutes, like 50 minutes, honestly, you probably do not need to do anything to these lessons, because the number one question we get or comment we get is that the lessons take way longer than 45 minutes. So if you were somewhere in the 50, 55 minute range, you probably don't even need to add extra content. If you are in the if you're like in an hour and a half because you have double blocks, but you don't meet every day, you would probably want to like smush some lessons together, basically, and do some finagling that way. If you've got a whole semester and you're much longer, like an hour or something, as I mentioned on that unit guide, or the unit plan, there's a huge bank of extra resources. And the other thing I would also recommend is, like, say you're teaching investing in the semester course and you feel like you need even more material. What I would recommend is when you're on our website, if you click investing as a topic from the home screen, these lessons, I'll say two things. These lessons are for our full curriculum. This is not for the semester course. These are like very much longer, more in-depth lessons. So these lessons that you see here are not the ones from semester course. That's kind of from our full curriculum that's huge and vast and not as standardized. But if you're looking for extra stuff on investing, all of this stuff over here, Some of them are in the semester course already, but some of them are just extra add-on stuff that you can do. So like these number chugs are brand new and very math focused. We've got way more questions of the day, you can see tons of them, about investing than what we used in our semester course. We've got some extra case studies. So if for some reason this 90, 45-minute period maps don't give you enough content, you can always go back here and pull something here. There's also the video library, the quiz games, which are Kahoots and Quizlets and things like that. So there's plenty of things to do if you feel that you need more material than what's in the semester course. As I mentioned, however, the opposite problem is typically true, which is that people say, like, this is way too much content. I had a group of people pilot the semester course in the fall. I don't think there was a single person who got through all 10 units, all 90 lessons. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, we're overly ambitious when we plan these things. Two, we feel like it's probably better to provide a little more content than what you need than to be standing around not having enough stuff to fill your class period. And three, we wanted to make sure that you have some leeway to adjust the timing to fit your needs. So one thing, like I said, is you can cut out entire units. If you're kind of like, I don't want to tackle taxes for some reason, or investing, or, you know, if there's just something you just don't feel like is what your students need right now, you can cancel entire units. You can also trim down lessons and not do all of the lessons. Within each lesson, there's lots of activities, and you can assign some of them for homework. You can kind of do a flipped classroom where the kids are going through the lessons themselves for homework, but then they're doing the big activities in class. There's all kinds of things you can do to think about the timing, but I would really encourage you to be successful with the semester course to do this in an intentional way, because if you just go into it, I'm warning you that doing all of the lessons in their entirety will take way longer than what you probably have. If you don't think about it intentionally, what you're going to end up doing is really spending tons of time on those first few units, and then not getting to a lot of the material. And I don't want you to be surprised that that happens. So that's why I'd really think about, like, what do you value? Where do you want to spend time? That kind of thing. Let's deep dive into a lesson. Okay. In this lesson called Saving Only Seems Hard, here's what you got. You've got the discussion prompts. And this is just sort of like a discussion prompt to kick off your class. You can have them jot some answers down. You can have them write. You can have them pair share, whatever it is you'd like to do in your class. And then these are the essential questions that this particular lesson will cover. Then you'll see here, basically the premise of this lesson is that saving seems hard. There's all these excuses and reasons that people give for not saving money. And in resources 4 through 8, there's a bunch of these laid out in a bunch of different ways. So like, this is an article about impulse shopping from Psychology Today. This is an article from MarketWatch about how Facebook and Instagram is the new, like, keeping up with the Joneses, basically. You see stuff that other people have and are bragging about, and then you want it too. There's this video about living paycheck to paycheck and what that means and why doing so makes it really hard to save money, but also why some people feel like they have to live paycheck to paycheck. This is a New York Times article about credit cards encouraging you to spend more when you shop with plastic rather than cash. And then here's a video about inflation and how it affects your savings. So this is a great way to say, okay, I've only got 15 minutes and I've got 5 resources, but we're giving you this little teacher tip that it's really fun to do this kind of as a jigsaw to say like, okay, this row or this table is going to read the Psychology Today article, and this one's going to read the Market Watch article, and then we're going to do like a share out. So instead of each kid reading 3 articles and watching 2 videos, you're going to sort of break them into groups, and then they're going to share the knowledge. And that's one good way of making sure that these things move along, rather than like having each kid do 5 different pieces of resources. The next thing you'll see here is an activity that is an interactive. It's the game Spent. And you click here, and what that does is it opens up another Google Doc that is an in-depth activity having them play the online game Spent. I want to draw your attention here. Many of the activities, almost all of them actually at this point, of the activities, projects, assessments, case studies, etc., are also available in Spanish. So anytime you open up an activity, project, etc., if you look in the upper right and you see that it says Spanish version, if you click that, that'll take you to the exact same thing translated into Spanish. And we did that for those of you who have English language learners. I will tell you Spanish is the only foreign language we have and offer right now. And we do not have every single resource. So for example, back to this lesson guide, these articles are all in English. So it is not an all-inclusive solution for your Spanish-speaking students, but the main big activities are indeed translated into Spanish for you to use. See a question? Okay, somebody's offering that the teacher tips are critical for keeping the timing. That's really good feedback from somebody who's used it before. And Jennifer, if you feel like I didn't answer your question about the class period, let me know, and I can readdress that later too. And then this lesson kind of wraps up with 3 things you need to know about an emergency fund. So basically, again, this lesson is focused on why saving can be hard. So they talk about a little bit about their own lives, about whether they would want to buy now using credit or save. They get 5 reasons why saving can legitimately seem hard. They play this game where they do live paycheck to paycheck in the game. And then they learn sort of why an emergency fund is so important. And then what we have is an exit ticket. The exit ticket is usually exactly 3 questions, and you can use it however you want. Very recently, we have translated the exit tickets into a Google form as an assessment. So you can click here now. It prompts you to make your own copy, which I'm going to do. And then your students would fill this out if you want to. And they put in their first, last name, their class period, and then here are the 3 exit ticket questions here. And that was from sort of teacher requests that some people were spending their time typing all the exit tickets into Google Forms anyway to kind of create these little graded assessments. So we did the work for you. And that's a very new feature probably in the last like month or 2. And then each lesson plan ends with some fast facts at the bottom. Let's see. So the other thing I will recommend to you is, again, some pro tips from Jessica. Think about how you want to implement these things. What pedagogical skills will you use to make this interesting, engaging, etc. for your students? And we've already done the curation, like those 3 articles, those 2 videos, like those are good, high quality resources. But we sometimes hear from teachers like, you know, I love your semester course, but my students say they're kind of bored because we do the same thing. It's always articles, videos, activities, articles, videos, activities all day, every day. And that's where like, we've written really good stuff, but you need to make the magic come alive. So we did not prescribe for you each time like, hey, do this part in groups or do this as role plays. But like, that's where you know your students best, you know your teaching style best, you know how much time you have, you know which parts you feel like are really important. And so like, for example, a lot of our resources, like there's one that's kind of like, how should people pay for these things, like in the checking, and it's kind of like, Should they use their debit card? Should they write a check? Should they pay in cash? Like you can do the worksheet, just have the students write the answers to each of the scenarios, but you could also role play it, or you could decide that these are going to be for whole group discussion or pair shares, or, you know, like you still have to think about like, how do I make this come alive for my students? And yeah, if every day you're just like, okay, students, click each link, answer each question, do each worksheet, like even with really good resources, they're going to get bored. So you should still think about like how, like, hey, sometimes we're going to do it on poster paper. Sometimes we're going to do some slides. And we didn't prescribe all that stuff for you, but that's where you kind of tailor it. We've got really, really good content. You tailor it for yourself and your students. The next thing I want to show you is in each lesson guide, there is a student activity packet, and you will see it. I'm going to show you how these things all relate. In the lesson guide, you'll see it right here. Resource 2 is always the student activity packet. And I've opened one up. This is the one for the savings lesson we just looked at. And what this is think of it as like a very old school traditional study guide. So here's that discussion prompt. And if you want them to write answers, they can write answers right in this box. Here are those 5 different resources, the 3 articles and 2 videos, and here's space to write notes for each one. So if you're going to take my recommendation and do it kind of as a jigsaw, group 1 would look at this article about why we impulse shop, and then they would write their answers right in here. And group 2 would look about Facebook and would write their answers right in here. And then when they did the share out, they would all complete their chart. Then when they do the activity payback, they would do that on the other activity sheet because there's all these questions that go along with it. So they would not necessarily do that here. And then here's the emergency fund and 3 questions that go along with creating an emergency fund. And here's that exit ticket in print form, and they could write their answers. We have a student activity packet that goes along with each and every lesson. But again, if that's what you do every single day, some kids are going to love it because they're going to know exactly what the expectations for your class are. They're going to know exactly how to access them and what to do. And some kids are going to love that. Other kids, like at week 3 or week 7 or month 3, who knows when, are going to be like, are you kidding? Another one of these? So again, this is kind of like we are not telling you like your kids must complete a student activity packet every single day. What we wanted to do is give you questions to ask your students that go along with every resource. You could ask the questions out loud. You could have them pair share. You could give them this, but not require them to write the answers. You could make this high stakes and collect it and grade each and every one. But that's another thing that teachers tell us, like, oh, it's taking me so long to grade each and every student activity packet. Like, remember, you're the boss. You're the teacher. It's your decision. So, like, if you're sick of grading these things, maybe you don't want to assign them, or maybe you want to check them for completeness, or something like that. But we provide them on a structured basis because we want you to have something. These are really great. Like if you're not there and you have a substitute, this is a great way to distribute the content. I'm not sure it's the most interesting way to do it every single day for 90 class periods in a row. The other thing is people ask kind of like, well, what do I do with this? So if you use Google Classroom, this is really easy to push out through Google Classroom. Each kid makes their own copy, then they can write right in the copy. They send, they get it back to you via Google Classroom. If you're not a Google Classroom user, your students will see this, and you actually will see this in preview only mode. I can edit it, but that's because I work at NextGen. But what you would do is go to File, Make a Copy, and each student would name theirs like Jessica Student Activity Packet 4.2. And then they could submit it electronically to you that way. You can also download it into Microsoft Word if you're not really down with Google. You can also print these out and give it to your students in hard copy and have them handwrite answers in. It's really up to you, and we are definitely not saying like you must use this or you must use this every day. This is again where sort of you decide what's going to work best for you and for your students. And some specific questions, and I'm going to send you these slides later to think about, is where do you fall on this spectrum with the student activity packets? Do you love the structure? Are you worried about the redundancy? Are you somewhere in between? Do you want written answers to everything, or do you want to have some big group discussions? How do you want to collect the work? How often? How do you want to grade it? Like I said, it can be everything from you check each and every one of these answers to every single question to some sort of spot checking or some sort of, completeness, or however it is that you feel like it'll work best. But again, my advice would be don't control your own destiny. Don't let the student activity packets happen to you and then be like, man, this is getting to be a lot. Think about it ahead of time and think about how you want to use them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about assessment. We wanted to give you 2 options for each end of unit assessment. So one option is to give the unit test. Again, the unit tests are translated into Spanish as well. The unit tests are written as exactly 25 multiple choice questions. So let me just keep scrolling down. And then they have 5 short answers. And then they have 1 essay. And the essay is not necessarily like a 5-paragraph essay with blah, 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 blah. It's more just like a longer response. And for all of these, for these short answers, as well as the essays, we do not give you a length, because at one school, essay means 5 sentences. At another school, it means 3 paragraphs. Again, that's you, your school culture, what you're looking for. So we do not give them details about what you're expecting. The one thing, again, I will say is that if you're like, I only want to give them multiple choice, go ahead and do that. If you want to put in specifications, if you care about grammar, punctuation, at least 3 sentences for each one, you would just go to File, make a copy, and edit that yourself and put your own requirements on there. Absolutely. The other option we have for you, so basically every one of the 10 units has a 25 question multiple choice, 5 short answer, and 1 essay. The other thing we have is a summative assessment at the end of each unit. And that is going to be something it's not going to be a cut and dry yes and no test. So for example, in this one, the savings unit wraps up with a project to create a public service announcement to inspire people to save. So for each unit, there is an option like this that is a more open-ended, creative, however you want to call it, option other than the unit assessment. Again, this goes with your school culture, what you're trying to measure, etc. Here is basically what those look like. So for example, for career, you'll find a 25 multiple choice, 5 short answer, 1 essay, but you'll also see the option to either create a career portfolio or a roadmap. For taxes, they can take the assessment or they can complete their own 1040 easy. For checking, they can do the assessment or they can do this comparison shopping to select a checking account. And all of these summative ones are designed to assess not every single tiny detail of what they've learned in the unit, but kind of the main ideas. And you can mix and match. You can sometimes do the assessments, sometimes do the summative assignments, you can do all summative assignments, you can skip them all together, whatever it is you would like to do. At this point, questions. Who's got questions for me that I have not already answered? I would love to take some questions. Anybody? Am I so thorough and or so talkative that you have nothing left to ask? Have I bored you all? Are you sleeping? I will also take this moment while you think of questions that you have to ask you now that you've seen a overview of the semester course. Now what are you thinking about a semester course for next year? And then I will also start answering your questions as well. So if you can take my poll and really feel no pressure to be like, now I'm using it 100%. It's not that. I was just sort of more interested to see where people are now as a result of the webinar. All right, let me give you another chance to answer the poll question on your screen. I've also got a few questions coming in that I'll answer here in a minute. All right, last chance to get your vote in. All right, let me close it up. Let me share the results. Awesome. And I don't blame you, the one that's not sure yet. You need to digest. I don't blame you. Okay, let me hit your questions. Great question. That you have a semester to teach the course, but only 75 periods instead of 90, and some guidance on what to cut and what to cover. Yeah, I could do that kind of maybe in a personalized way to sort of see kind of what your emphasis is. I would say in general, take a look at your state standards and maybe cut out anything that doesn't address your state standards if you don't have state standards or if you don't care for them and don't want to follow them. Another suggestion I would have is see if your students do the whole paying for college thing somewhere else. If they do, you could really trim that down or not do it at all. Another option really is the initial stuff on finding a job, because resumes and cover letters are important. They're also really time consuming if you want your students to do a really good one, because I mean, honestly, those things should be proofread like a bazillion times to make sure they're good. So that's another place where you could probably cut out the whole unit or really trim it down, because it's not so much personal finance per se. So those would be my across the board suggestions, but I'm also willing to talk to anybody who wants to about sort of more personalized solutions. Has anybody attempted this as an after school program? And if so, how did it go? I'm not aware of anybody using semester course for an after school program. We have a 18-hour workshop, which is actually a series of 12-hour-and-a-half long lessons that I developed that might be a better fit for after school, just because they don't focus so much on assessments. There's no exit ticket, like that kind of thing. It's kind of a little looser. But I mean, I guess if you have an after school program that's going to meet 90 times, semester course might work. But I have not heard of anybody using it in a completely outside the normal classroom setting. And if you do want me to send you that 18-hour workshop or tell you where to find it, I'm happy to do that. Oh, okay, so yes, somebody is saying that they've used it kind of before and they would love to see some more of our questions of the day as bell ringers. We've already written discussion questions for each. Most of the lessons in semester course start with a discussion question. And those are very internally focused on the student. So a lot of times it's like, you know, what's one thing you would save for? Or like when you hear investing, what do you first think of? Or, you know, if you were creating a budget, what would you consider your wants versus your needs? They're very sort of internally focused. The questions of the day are sort of more trivia based, and we can think about putting more of those in. There's a couple times when questions of the day are what we use there, but maybe we could also offer some suggestions on questions of the day to use along with each lesson for people who want that too. That's not a bad suggestion. 2 comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is awesome. Well, thank you. Oh, interesting. Brooke is also going to put this into Canvas this summer and is offering, if anyone else needs it in that format, that they can contact her. So maybe rather than spread Brooke's email far and wide, if you want this in Canvas and or want to collaborate with Brooke about that, send me an email and then I'll send it on to her. Sounds good. That's a really generous offer of you. Thanks, Brooke. What type of differentiation does NGPF offer? I'm assuming you mean differentiation in the classroom. So it's a good question. We don't say for each of our lessons or each of our resources, like, hey, here's a way you could differentiate it. I think a lot of the resources lend themselves well to that. So for example, in that, I keep coming back to it, in that savings lessons with that jigsaw, there's 2 videos and there's a New York Times article and a Psychology Today article and a Market Watch article. So watching the video is probably going to be much easier for students than reading the articles. And the Market Watch article is probably going to be an easier read than the New York Times or the Psychology Today, which is probably the hardest one to read. So there are opportunities for you as the teacher to be thoughtful about your implementation and possibly divvy the work up in a fashion that meets your students' needs best. There are also, our activities are usually much longer than what would fit in a 45-minute period, but a lot of them have some redundancy built in. So there might be 5 scenarios, and you could differentiate by how many you want the students to complete. You could do full-on modeling of 1 or 2, or do it together as a class. So there are ways to adapt and differentiate, but at this point we don't have like, hey, here's, level 1, level 2, and level 3 for each of the activities. And part of that is, I don't think anybody's completely solved the differentiation issue. I think if you did, you could make $1 bazillion if there was a silver bullet there. 2, it's really hard because we don't know your students. So like one school's like low-level learner means they're a high school student reading at a 2nd grade level, whereas like another school's lowest level learner means that they're like, an 11th grader reading at an 8th grade level. It's really different between schools. So differentiation is really tricky. I think there's plenty of places to do it within our curriculum, but you kind of need to do some of that yourself, unfortunately. Has anyone stretched this course out over a year? Yes. There are a couple people that were in my fall feedback group that actually teach a year-long class and are still going. And I should have mentioned this when I looked at the lesson plan, but for example, that savings lesson plan, oopsie, sorry, let me go back a little bit. The savings lesson plan has this activity in it that says it'll take 15 minutes. If they seriously write out answers to every single one of the questions on that interactive, and you spent time debriefing them, and you can make these last for sure. So yes, there are people that started in the fall and are still going in the spring, and they've done everything with fidelity, and they've got enough content for sure. Great. Somebody asked, are you aware of the WISE financial literacy exam? And we said we aligned to Jumpstart. We are aware of the WISE test. We are not in any formal way affiliated with them. And we have not explicitly made our content to address the WISE test. So I don't know. There's lots of like philosophical thoughts about testing students and that kind of thing. I think we overall think that personal finance is like a series of really good decisions that you make in an imperfect world where like you don't have infinite money and you don't have everything going your way all the time. And we want to equip students to really make really great decisions and have the knowledge to do that. So we tend to not be very cut and dry. Like there are some finance curriculum that are like, no debt, don't ever carry debt. and we don't take that stance. There's people that are like, you need a zero-based budget, and we don't really take that stance. We sort of take the stance of like, these are all like a wide variety of decisions you have to make. So anyway, that's a very long way of saying we haven't structured it to exactly fit the WISE test. I think that if you did all of our lessons with fidelity, you would probably set your kids up pretty well for the WISE exam, but it's not exactly aligned in any way. Oh, cool. Somebody's using the career curriculum for their business club. That's awesome. And that's another, that's actually in the semester course, we're going to do some revamping over the summer. So that's a good point. We're going to do some small changes to semester course over the summer, just with some minor feedback that we've gotten from people. They will not be humongous changes. However, I'm going to do some revamping of like our career resources that are on that homepage of our website. So there should be more good stuff to come. But yeah, that's awesome that you have a business club. Cool. Can you print out lessons and make a binder? Or can I do it? Am I breaking copyright rules? Okay. First, I thought you were asking me to print them out for you, and I was like, no. But yes, you can definitely print them out. You can make a binder. You can make your own digital copies of things. We ask that you like don't take our logo off. Don't pass them off as your own. We really don't want people using our resources to turn a profit. So we give everything away for free. If you're a classroom teacher, absolutely no problem. We occasionally have people that are like, you know, I go into schools and sell my services to like as after school clubs, and I want to use your resources. And we're like, we don't really want you charging schools for you to teach our curriculum that they could get for free. So anyway, but otherwise, yes, you can use them however you want. Just make sure you keep our logo and stuff on them. Yes, and somebody uses the discussion questions as bell ringers. Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? I'd love to stay and answer them. I'm also happy to shut up a bit. The only upcoming webinar we have that is part of our regular school year schedule is about teaching through interactives on May 10th. The next steps for you are to, if you haven't already, we just started up a closed Facebook group that is teachers only, called the FinFanatics, I want to say, on Facebook. And I encourage you to look at our Facebook and join if you haven't already. Again, if you don't have a teacher account yet, please, on our website, sign up for a teacher account so I can send you answer keys, and there's really no other way to get the assessments for the semester course other than signing up for a teacher account. So if you have not done that, that should be like your number one step. And then of course, review what you've seen here today. Probably tomorrow, I will send you your certificate for PD as well as the slides, a video recording, etc. But review the resources and email me if you need any help anywhere. And then of course, count down the summer vacation. That's also your next step. I'm going to put my contact information up here, and then I got a few more questions. Great question. When we make changes, are they shared in a newsletter? She wants to make sure she keeps up to date, or he, sorry, either one. Sorry, I'm not sure. We don't put the changes out in a newsletter. Here's why. Sometimes, because our resources are so heavily filled with things we find on the internet, links break all the time. So like, for example, if I go kind of back to this lesson guide, you can see that the last update was February 14th, 2018. And that could be that like maybe one of these videos or articles was no longer available online and we had to find a replacement. And if we emailed everybody every time we had to do that, it would be quite a lot. So no, we don't. When we make huge sweeping changes, which we do not do very often, we email about it. But otherwise, what you can do is check the date at the bottom. And depending on when you last looked at it, you'll be able to say like, this is all the same or something has changed, basically. Let's see. Do you have pre-recorded webinars for using spreadsheets? I did one webinar about spreadsheets for teachers. It was a while ago now. It was probably like a year and a half ago or a year ago. It's on our webinar page. And then there's also a whole bunch of YouTube videos that I created to help students learn how to use spreadsheets, and I can send you a link to that if you're interested. The webinar, like I said, is kind of old now, but it's on there. It's on the webinar page. And Julia said he's in the FinFanatic Facebook group. Highly recommend it. Love reading new ideas and asking questions to other teachers in personal finance. Yeah, the FinFanatic Facebook group is new, but it is an active bunch, and they're sharing good resources, and it's pretty good. I love it. So, anybody else? Any questions? If you are, if you're like, when is this ever going to end? We're basically done. But I'm happy to stay on the line and answer anything else you have. Let's see. Somebody just sent a FinFanatic request. Awesome. We check in with those often, so we'll make sure we approve you. Great question. Still room for the summer conference, or is it full? Summer Institute is full. We received, I don't know, somewhere in the hundreds of applications and took 24 people total. So Summer Institute is totally full. That said, we are going to be zipping around the country to other workshops and things coming up. So check our events page, which is here. Let's see, where is it? Under PD. Go in here, sorry. You can see we have one-day fin camps coming up in Northern California tomorrow, Southern California next week. We'll be in Nevada twice in May. We'll be in Maine 3 times, I want to say, this summer. Lots of good stuff coming up. So if you did not get into Summer Institute, check our events page. See, some of these have registrations on it that you can go ahead and register. And we've got even more stuff coming up soon. Yeah, awesome. Anybody else? Okay. I will stay here for another minute or two, see if we have anything else coming in. Otherwise, very happy that you joined today. Email me anytime, jessica@ngpf.org, and I am always happy to help.